Hi, this is Manuel from Workamajig, and I'm one of the trainers here in the training group. We're going to be starting in a little bit. I did leave a note on the chat line just to make everyone aware that I'll be looking at the chat line for questions, as well as, if there's any comments. I'll try to pause throughout the session, but we're going to give it a minute or two more to let everyone else join. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hi, again, my name is Manuel Rivera, and I'm one of the trainers here at Workamajig. Today's webinar is on the project schedules beyond as soon as possible. We're going to talk about more of the schedule screen in Workamajig for projects, and we're going to talk about just some alternative ideas that we have available to you that you can start to think about for your teams. Maybe you're new for Workamajig and you maybe are about to have this session with your account manager, your implementation specialist, or maybe you have just had the session and want to know more, or you've been working with us for a while and you just want a refresher and think of other ways that you want to process your schedule and how it works in regards to how we've set up by default and what other options you have. So again, we're going to be using the chat line mostly for questions. I'll be pausing throughout and reading those questions. I'll answer them as best as I can. We're going to try to stay on topic. So if it's a question that doesn't fall into today's topic, feel free to reach out to your account manager. You can always reach out to us by emailing support@workamajig.com. It's a ticket-based system, and we can answer your questions that way, and then we can spend more time answering or discussing the scenarios that you may have individually. Okay, but this is pretty straightforward of a session. We really want to introduce you to the idea that you have access to Workamajig as project managers or those who are creating project schedules, the ability to think more of why Workamajig does what it does and what options you have. Within my screen right now, I am showing you the Today Creative screen, which is usually what your creatives would see, or maybe it's your default screen still that we've given you when you first start using Workamajig. It's going to list tasks for your creatives to work on. We're going to come back to this screen, but usually that's where I want to start off because usually most people have this screen on by default when they log in. I'm going to navigate to the main menu though, and whether you're a creative or a project manager, you're going to have this icon called projects. So under project manager, you'll see that icon here as well as that folder icon. And I prepared something to show you. I prepared sample projects that we want to reference or use for you to maybe think about as to how maybe you can prepare your projects and technically templates to be used. One of the things that we want to make things easier for you as users is to have as less clicks as possible when creating your projects. Now, I don't want to spend time talking about templates, but the idea is that, or at least the goal is, to have templates that will turn into projects where a schedule exists that you can use. Now, when you start with Workamajig, like I said, in any scenario that is just discussed, you're going to find that you go to a project and you go to a project schedule. Okay, and this is my screen of a project schedule. You can have these screen items throughout your screen. You can turn them off or on. We allow you to do that by toggling the squares in the top right, hiding or showing the Gantt chart here in the middle, hiding or showing the details here on the right of each of the tasks, and be able to navigate. As you can see, I'm navigating on the left by moving the arrows up and down, and seeing the details of those tasks. And then obviously getting the information that's coming from your task rows or grid here on the left. But the idea that when you start with using Workamajig is that if you start to add rows in a template or in a project, they're going to have this cascading effect. That's usually a perfect world scenario where we can start to just have a discussion on, oh, okay, there's maybe in this case 4 things that you're keeping track of as milestones. They can also be considered as buckets of information that you want to accomplish for this project to finish, to be completed. And so you can see that I've named mine very simply, very generically. They're numbered by task IDs, lines on the grid. But what makes this work is that one, as you can see, especially by the graphical representation here, and I can zoom in on this Gantt chart by clicking on that more day view here, today being Tuesday, is that we can see a cascading effect due to the fact that we have these rules for predecessors. Now, again, that's a perfect world scenario. Maybe we draft something after we intake it. Maybe we have a review after we draft it. Maybe we produce something after it's been reviewed and approved, right? And so that goes along with what we have. And so the system is going to look at these tasks and tell you, okay, we have these days. These are the span of time that these tasks take for someone to accomplish something. And within those tasks, we can make assignments. And you can see under the assign column here that we established roles or labor categories, or as how we have it labeled in Workamajig, they're called services, right? But they're really more of a talent or role that the person or someone will eventually take on during those tasks, during those milestones. So within that time frame, you can see very simply, I've set a day for each of these to be accomplished. So, and then each of these, whether it's a person, if I click on it, you can see that it's me, or whether it's a placeholder that we don't know yet who's going to be doing, in this case, research, but we know that they're going to be allocated some time, right? And I can travel through the schedule here as well, going to the right, moving down that schedule and seeing those services, those categories, those placeholders that will take place within those days. Now, because this is a computer, right, we're asking it to be very literal. We're asking it also to think of this as I call it, I allude to it more of a mathematical equation, right? There's the computation on the left side of the equal sign, and then the answer on the right side of the equal sign, right? If you're reading from left to right. And that's really what this is. Oh, okay, well, we have these tasks that exist within a day frame that are going to be following each other. There's instructions on the dependency or predecessor column that says, line 2 follow after line 1, line 3 follow after line 2, etc. Right? And then what the system is going to do is also going to take a look at when you have project date selected. Okay, well, the system by default always looks at the project start date that you set up when you created the project. And in this case, I've selected today's date as the project start date. So that means that task 1, since there's nothing coming before it, will start today, and then each of the following tasks will follow in sequential days after. Pretty straightforward, makes sense. And what happens here with this Gantt chart too is that it is a representation, as I scroll through, of what we call the plan start and plan complete dates on those tasks. And these dates are really the answer, right, to that computation that comes from the left side of the predecessors, the number of days, and obviously the project start date. Now, we don't want to be just another spreadsheet program We want to be able to give you guys all the tools that you can get out of this. So one of the expectations that you may have already run into or that you will run into when working with projects is that we want to be dynamic, especially with those dates. Okay. You can move, you can expect the system to give you feedback and to try to, as best as possible, right, in a way, um, let you know that there's something wrong or that something will be wrong or that the schedule is not as what you planned. And as you can see here in the middle, we have a couple of different, I have at least organized my grid here to show different sets of dates. And right now, by default, before you start anything, you always have plan start dates and plan completes. And that's really what ties into that Gantt chart. Okay. Now, if you wanted to manipulate, let's say that maybe it's not the 30th, maybe it's something else. And I think I saw a question about changing start dates. You can always go back to the main dashboard of the project. You can go to project settings. And you can see that at the bottom of this screen on the right side, you can update the start date, and maybe I want it to be the 1st, right? And then I can go ahead and save it. I can go back to my schedule, and then you can see that my date has now moved to the 1st. And if I go to my tasks, they have also updated, okay? So that's what is the design, right? So that's a great question from Giovanni there. To change and update your tasks that way. Now, from the perspective and defaults that I've so far described to you, you may have also noticed that my due date didn't change, right? And that due date didn't change because I needed to go just like the plan start date and update it manually if I needed to for it to be something different. But I also tell my clients that I train and anyone that asks that the schedule really is the one that drives the tasks. You know, sometimes we may be faced with the idea that, well, I have a project that's due in a month, let's say, so the 30th of December, right? For this example, I don't want to think about what each of these tasks are doing. I just want my end date and I want it to be locked in. And we understand that, but we can't just tell the system to assume such things because it's more than just a date in our world, meaning that there's a reason why these milestones exist. There's a reason why things take time to be completed, and assignments, right, or these placeholders, right? This work is labor intensive enough to, okay, plan more than one day, right, or more one instant of time. And so we want your team to really start to think about, okay, why does it take so long? Why are we always behind? Can we get there early? Why are we telling the client such a date? And so this is what makes that meat of the answer. Okay. So just to let you know that the due date is really more of a reference point or flag. Because my days, I moved them up from today to tomorrow, and I had a reference endpoint selected and the due date as the 3rd of November, you can see already in the Gantt chart here that I pushed my last scheduled date to next week. And by doing so, the schedule is now already reacting and saying, whoa, there's something wrong, that this task will not be completed by the project completion date, right? So that's where we want you to start to think about, okay, this is what Workamajig has started to tell us. This is, the effects of the changes. And the reason why I tell you is because our clients will sometimes see, and our users will see, okay, I have these dates, I can just go ahead and change them. Well, you're changing the results, right? And if you were, and I'm talking basic math here, right? Your teacher, right, or whoever's doing the exam, right, would say, well, you can't change the answer to fit your computation, right, to whatever number you want. You have to fix the computation to get the number you want, right? So it's almost like cheating. But it's really also to be reflective on the true instructions that you're asking the system to follow, right? There's a reason why one follows after the other. There's a reason why these things may be more than one day that it takes for them to be completed. So just think about that for a moment. I'm gonna visit some questions here. Um, it says if you have changed it in the project setting and it doesn't reflect it in the schedule. I'm not sure exactly why it wouldn't change in your project schedule. I would maybe talk to your team and their account manager to see if maybe you have a security right issue where maybe it's limiting your ability to change it. Or maybe it's also because, which is something that we have yet to talk about, the project has already started and at least the first few tasks have already been updated. So the start date then it's not so much dependent on the project start date, but it's now looking at what actually has happened. So we'll get to that in a moment. Let's see, I have another question from Daniel. Um, Locking in dates. And yes, we're definitely gonna talk about that. Um, those scenarios where we have those lock dates. So good questions. I'm gonna put a pin on it because we're gonna talk about them. But I just needed you to understand at least where we start off with the design of Workamajig. So in that case of the next steps to get to answer those questions, the system is also going to ask you well, just to finish my thought here with this last one. So you have a choice, right, with this last task. Do I tell the client that it's going to be late and that we're not going to meet the December 3rd deadline that I've set as a flag? Do I tell my team to rush and maybe we crunch one of these milestones into a similar day as another? You can do that. And we'll talk about those options here in a moment. But however you do it, right, that's how you then adapt. If you have obviously hard dates, like I said, we're going to talk about those in a moment, but those are going to be within the schedule, right? Not so much sort of a deadline here. Okay. Now, things can happen, obviously, during the process of your work, of your project, you get delayed. And so things need to be updated from a perspective of, as I just mentioned, letting your clients know that things are running behind or that you're going to have to crunch your team into completing sooner. And that's again where the days or predecessors are going to come into play to fix. But before I get to that point, one other thing that I want to mention is that the system needs some help from you to know more information. So as I mentioned, these are sort of the default results from the instructions you provided the system. But once you finalize, let's say that I go back to my project settings and I go ahead and revert back to my 30th. So that way we see some nice clean green numbers and not red or symbols here, flags. One of the things that we want you to also do is that once you've completed or the preparation of your project, we have what's called baseline. We used to call these original dates. So you may see those in some other areas that I show you here today. But under the more button, we would have the team who is, or the person who is, making this project live and asking those to start working, to set the baseline. What did that do? The baseline is actually going to be these two columns, and they're going to be populated by copying over what's on the plan start and plan complete. Now, if things change like the project start date or somebody starts a task later or completes it later, those kinds of actions, as you saw, move and update your plan start and plan complete, but they will not move your baseline start and complete. That way you have a reference point. Oh man, we're starting a day behind, or we had this originally on the 3rd, it's now the 6th, because we had to start the project later. So those are going to be things that you get to see from the perspective of a baseline, setting the baseline, okay? And then the other thing that you're going to see is that the system is going to then track actuals dates. And that's just going to allow the system to know, okay, this is when things actually happened. But at the same time, by the defaults, I'm going to ask the plan start dates to also update themselves because they're a representation that's linked back to your Gantt chart, right? So that starts to be correct, right? Okay, well, we started this late, so I got to show that we started late, which means that we got to push this next one, this next task later as well. So there's two things that you'll see, right, from that perspective. So just because we're on here and it's not tomorrow, right, I can't show you this. So I can put a start date of, the 1st. And you can see that also updated my plan start date. right? So those things are going to be things that your users are entering in to be able to then see that reflected on here. Oh, okay, so Manuel here, because I'm assigned to this, started on December 1st. So now my plan started as on December 1st, which means that everything gets pushed because the system is still relying on my instructions as to what comes next. And also to tell me that maybe during our overnight process, things are not going to meet, certain deadlines, in this case, that project due date, right? So that's one thing that I wanted to point out. All right, let's see if we have a few other questions here. So I know we're gonna get back to lock-in dates, and so we answered that one. Okay, and Giovanni has another question. You can remove the baseline dates, but why would you, right? That's really the question. And here's why I would tell you to consider it. The baseline was meant to be more of the original plan. During and after the project is completed, your team can come back to those and see the reference points. Okay, we thought we were going to get this done by Friday. And so far during the project, we're having a due date of the Monday. Why? Oh, because this happened versus this. I don't have any other way to track history, so I would like to see the baseline. Now, you can hide the baseline from the view of your users, sure, but you don't want to delete it. We want to be able to see why things changed when they changed. Okay. So let me see here. Question from Kelly. Did the plan start date change when you change your actual because you have the setting check to adjust your schedule? Yes, Kelly, that's correct. So by default, when you start with Workamajig, the default is that the actual dates change the plan dates so that the system can provide the project manager, whoever's overseeing the project, hey, this is what's happening based on the instructions that you gave me because those are still important. I'm just not going to be a computer that takes over and decides what things for you. I'm just relying on those instructions, but I'm also relying on what people are telling me when they started or completed tasks. And and I guess Kelly had a follow-up because your plans change, your plan dates don't change. And that's fine. And we're going to talk about, the alternatives to them not changing, and that's going to be up to you. But we want to have this webinar to tell you what the design is. If you, again, are going to have this session with your account manager, if you already had this session, it's been a while, you want to have a refresher, it's up to you. Again, we didn't want to just be a screen with fields, right? I, as a trainer, get a lot of questions regarding why do I have to work so hard on my schedule? Well, which way do you want to work harder at, right? Having too many milestones, that's sometimes one thing that I hear a lot. And then we talk about other ways to approach it. Oh, things are always changing, so I have to always update the dates. Okay, well, if that's your role and how your work focus is to make sure that the dates are aligned, then that's fine, right? But if you're seeing the dates change because things are changing, the system here is giving you a up-to-date feedback on, well, things didn't go the way you planned them to. So those are the things that you would have that discussion with your account manager. And we do allow you to not have those dates change. But then we have clients that come in and say, well, I want it to look perfect, or I want this to reflect what's actually happening. So now I have, 20 rows of milestones, and I have to go in there every day and update each one. Right? Obviously, that's the worst case scenario in that scenario there, or in that situation. But just wanted to say that those are considerations why we chose to have these on by default. So Rhonda asked how I populated the baseline dates. Again, once you're ready to go live with your project, you would click on the More button and you set the baseline. That's what's going to copy over your plan start and plan complete dates into the baseline start and plan and baseline complete dates. So using that button under More, set baseline. Okay. All right, good things here. Let's see. I think I have someone. Okay, and oh yeah, and I do see that we're using a Q&A feature, which is fine, not a problem. So I do see a question there. Can you add tasks after you set a baseline? Yes, you can. You can definitely do that. The system is just going to consider it a new row, right? So new task, and whatever I actually have to type something in here, whatever number to save it. So you can, there's just not going to be any information except for, okay, did I have any predecessors? The system again is being very literal. Obviously I don't have a baseline right now because I don't have, that copy. And so at those times you would probably want to do it manually, right? You don't want to copy and set baselines again because you're going to then change those original baseline dates to be whatever the plan start and complete dates are at that moment. So just be aware, just be careful that it will copy over onto the old baseline dates. But yes, you can definitely add tasks as you go along. So perfect. Let's see what else. Okay, making sure that I got all those questions. Okay, so that's one way to do or to at least understand where Workamajig is designed to think of what's going on in the project. Now, before we get to the answers of, okay, well, the locking and things down, we just, again, the part of the presentation here is to have you think about of all the other ways to of managing your project, or at least setting it up. And so another alternative that we offer for you is, and I prepared another project for that. It's called adding a lag, and I've labeled this project as having a -1 lag. So I'll show you what that means. This is actually exactly the same schedule as the one I just showed you. I haven't done anything different except not set up the baseline dates. So we're still looking at the same thing. I'm still over here looking at these tasks. I think the only thing is that I'm not assigned to this first task. But what we wanted to also let you know is that because this is being very literal, right? If I was to complete a task today, the people that are waiting to finish or to start the next task technically don't have to start the next task until tomorrow. Okay, and so sometimes we'll actually hear from our clients to say, oh, that's too long of a wait. We just, we need to get this done one after the other. If it's done in the morning, in the afternoon, let's see if we can get this done. And so you can go back to the column where you have your predecessors, and you'll have these blue links in here. If I click on it, and it'll give you this area where you can see, okay, task number 2, which is called draft, it's dependent on line 1 or task 1 called intake. But I can go ahead and add negative lag, which is like saying go back in time 1 day. If I click save, you're going to start to see that my task is right underneath the other, right? And so maybe to make this more obvious, maybe I need to move my days to 2 days so that you can see a little bit better there. And then here, this one, maybe it's same thing. We can do a -1 lag for this task, depending on the other one before it, and see now how they're kind of following on the due date of the one. They're not skipping a day or not waiting a day. As soon as it gets done, then go to the next one, go to the next one. Let me actually do 3 days here so you can see that better. Oh, sorry, I meant to do this one for 3 days. So we can go back to 1. And we can do a -1 here. So the idea is that the system is allowing you to go back with a space of time of 1 day, represented here in these blocks, so that when a milestone is completed on that first task, the second one, the third one, right, when the second one's done and so forth, can start as soon as the other one's completed, and not wait that extra day. So that's another thought. I don't know if, for this group, if you run into that, but again, we get that feedback that says, okay, what else can we do? The system will notify your team via a notification or an email, letting them know that the next task that they're assigned to based on predecessor linkage, as long as they're assigned to the task that follows, that task is ready to get started. But we do preach with you that on our trainings that we would like for your team to really live within the system, more than depend on those notifications, have it as a screen that's in the background, right? And in this case, just to make this look and work enough to show you, first, I'm gonna set my baselines. So I'm gonna go ahead and set my baselines. Good practice to do that. Go back and confirm that my baseline dates are there. And then go into, and because of the topic that we are discussing, I can't focus on the Workamajig way of, assigning work to people as we've described it in our trainings and our guides. I'm going to go in, around this way in a quick way. I'm going to assign myself to this art director position here. So I'm going to go ahead and reassign myself to that service. So we can see what that looks like. So there's myself, and that's me. And I'm going to go ahead and reassign. And that's just going to allow my name to appear in those tasks. But the idea with this is that when I go back to the Today Created page, I'm going to be able to see tasks, and this is now treading into this area, the way that I want to see them. We default your view to a card view, as you can see here, or you can see it from a grid view, as you can see here, and then organize your columns the way you want to see them. You can see original dates are there to help your team remind them of things that are meant to be completed by a certain time. Obviously, if they work as a team, it really relies on everybody completing those tasks by that date. But what I want to show you is that if I'm looking at controlling what I show here in either of these formats, under the More button, any user can select, okay, well, maybe I want to hide those tasks that don't have their predecessors completed. And so I want to check on this box. Or maybe I don't. And in the case where you don't, you can uncheck that box and save it. And then I can see more of that table of tasks that I have. And my project that I've been working on is that 01, I believe it's actually 0142. Let me look at my recents. Yep, 0142. So I can go ahead and even use the feature here to filter in the search field for that certain project. And I can already see, okay, which ones are available to me visibly, assigned to me, but I'm allowing to see more of the future, more things that are not yet completed. And obviously, if I was hiding those that are not yet completed, right? Go back to my display options and hide those. And then I went ahead and just marked my task completed. Very quickly, I can just mark this at 100%. That's an easy way to mark a task complete without entering time. But again, we preach that you should enter time, right? The idea is that when those are done, we should be able to see the next tasks. Let me see if there we go. Just needed to refresh it. And just follow on to the next one and then see other things. But that's where we, and again, oh, that's the other thing. My task had other people in it and those assignments aren't completed. So let me go clean my act up here, go back to my project and my schedule. And let me take out that research that nobody's assigned to. That'll make the task completed. And we can even see that on the Gantt chart with these solid lines going through it. But once we have that, let's see if I'll do it. Now I can see my second task ready to work. I don't have to wait till tomorrow when I come in to see that I have a task, or whoever's next to see that I have a task due, right? It's gonna plop it on there right away. Okay, so that's one of the things that I wanted to show you there with those negative lags. The ability to kind of adjust your schedule, still follow the instructions, still have your days, still depend dependencies, but just to scrunch your schedule so that it matches up to one right after the other on those due dates. Okay. Okay. I think someone had a question on colors. I guess I would have to go back to my project schedule. I think that's where I've been looking at my colors. So this is just the assignments. and the completion, and the blue is just the task breadth of time that's there. So nothing too fancy with the colors. There are ways to make this even fancier. You can add timeline segments, but again, that's kind of off topic. But mostly this is just to show you that we have your tasks, obviously across a certain time or a number of days, and that the black bar is going through them there. I don't know if this orange one means that there's an assignment currently being worked on. I forget, but something that I can definitely see if can follow up with your team later. Okay. But yeah, so that's the negative lag option that we wanted to show you. And then one other option before we get to those specific questions there, we have is, and I'm going to go back to my list of my projects. We have a, we have two. Good. The other one is the duration of project. So we have another set or style to also think of here. And it's this one where there are no predecessors. Maybe your team is into an agile style of working your milestones, your tasks, things that just need to be worked on between your set start date and your set project due date. So by going into your tasks details, as you can see here, there's a constraint that's not as soon as possible as we defaulted to be. The constraint now is duration of project. And the duration of project says, look at one or two things. Look at the start date of the project and the due date of the project, and then set those dates to be the same. Or if you have a project that's already started and the tasks are outside of that, let's go look at those instead and make that the duration of all the other tasks so that they're pretty much in line. So that's the idea that we want to offer you to think about. Hey, oh, I didn't know that we had that. Or sometimes my clients who will ask for something like this will ask in the scenarios of, okay, well, we have a milestone that we track to bucket, hours in or costs or whatever it is, or, for another topic here, but they want to allow just one of the tasks to be set as the duration of project. And so that's when I can go back to maybe my lag project here. And I can go to that schedule and I can go ahead and add a row for, project management, let's say. And then I can, I'll save this, that I added it, and I can go up because maybe I want it to be at the top so that it's easy to find, not in the middle. And then this one, as long as there's no dependencies or predecessors, I'll be able to select duration of project and save it. So that way it knows that it's being worked on over the period of the time of the project. You'll zoom in so you can see that it's covering the week. We have that there. Okay, so that's another one that you'll have access to. Look, Rob, I was able to answer my question on the orange line representing the baseline. Perfect. Thanks, Rob. So that's the goal of duration of project. It's very specific to not be a child task, not to be a task linked to other dependencies, just to run through the gamut of the project timeline. So we have that. And then one other style here, last one to show you, it's called a 1 day. So we have clients that will ask us, hey, we create projects and get them done at the same time, the same day. Just great, you can do that. So besides putting in your project settings for when your start date should be, the schedule will have it where obviously the duration of days is just 1. And you can see that in the Gantt chart that it's just a 1 day. But then you're using that negative lag feature that I talked about to bring you back to center or to the same day to complete, right? And to obviously see those tasks be, lined up that way, kind of checked off. So lag is a great thing to use. If you have questions on it beyond what I've discussed, please feel free to reach out to us, to your account manager through the support email. so that we can obviously help you in those scenarios. But in the scenarios, as was asked earlier, right? How do we lock things down, for example? So that's where you are able to go ahead and here I'll insert a task. You can use these ellipses if you didn't know by hovering over the row that you want to add a task underneath, the one that I have here. So maybe this one is some kind of media timeline, media task that needs to be on a certain day. And again, the system is still going to respect the duration just in case it needs to be more than one, but usually when it's a hard date, it's a 1-day task, right? So in the details of the task, just so you know, we have these other constraints. Now, one is difficult to show you their complete process or effect because you're planning these ahead of time. You have to get to that date to see what happens or move them or set markings not according to the dates you want. But when it comes to you want to have something done by a certain time, I usually recommend to do the must finish on as the feature and then to select the date that should happen. So in my project here, maybe it's Thursday where that should happen. And that locks down that those dates. So, you know, maybe in that consideration that you have with your team as to, I don't want my dates to move. Well, maybe it wasn't all the dates that you wanted to move. Maybe it was just that one date. This one doesn't have a predecessor. It can have a predecessor. I could still link it to the one above me. In the predecessor column of that row, I can either click to select which line I wanted to rely on, or I can just reference the line above to link it to. And so then this one can now change to the third line instead. So we can have that, right? And we can save it. So that way we know that, yes, it still relies on the other. Yes, it can still happen on a different day if somebody decides to not complete it by that certain day. But based on the fact that it's a date that will not move when it comes to your tasks being started or completed accordingly. So let's see here, right? Maybe my start date for this one is the 2nd. See how everything moved 3rd and 6th, but this one did not move. It's still the 2nd. So those are the things that can help you with your lockdowns. But again, remember, the system is still going to look at your computation, right? Those duration lines, those dependency lines, you know, and then how the constraint, the default constraint that we have and the default settings to push those dates according to what you have, but knowing that you can lock one of your milestones down. Hey, the usual scenario I describe it as is you have a photo shoot, right? And you can't really, unless, you know, it has to move because of scheduling conflicts, you know, you want it to be on a certain day and that locks it down. But it won't really move with those push dates features that we talked about. So let's see if I have more questions here. Printing the Gantt chart. So we offer you the ability to print under the print button and to print the Gantt chart. And you can do it in both PDF and Excel. If you want to print a Gantt chart for all projects, I don't know if I know that answer. I know that I offer this Gantt chart feature of the project section under the My Project screen here. But to print it, I don't think I have it where it mass prints all Gantt charts. Again, maybe reaching out to your account manager to see if there's something that we can look at settings wise. I'm not aware that we have it. But 2, again, as I mentioned, we want this to be sort of in the background of your screens. It's meant to be something that's, you know, online. So printing is a sort of an option, yes, but maybe not our primary feature or function or thought of that. So just some things to consider as you're going to into that discussion with your account manager on printing all projects Gantt charts. Okay. Somebody asked if there's a way to fraction your days. No, there is no way to fraction your days. So again, use those lag features, right? Those placeholders that I showed you in your projects, that talk about who's working what, maybe that's how you want to think of someone's day, right? Because how much of a day of the time are you taking for that person to complete an 8-hour day? I set myself up here with 2 hours, so that's what a quarter of my day is already spent on that task. But if you need things to go quick, just do that same day negative lag option project that I showed you. And then, and that's the thing too, is the feedback we get and the experience, the comments, right? Oh, I want this to be completed same day. We move fast. I don't want to sit there and track because I have other things moving, right? So then go ahead and just make your schedule as simple as possible. So make your negative lag 1-day task or set of tasks, right? Maybe it's not the whole project, and know that the system is just going to show you what comes next after you're done, but that the hours really are your fractional time per person, right, of what each of them are doing. That's where we see that work best. Okay, so, and that goes into more of the resourcing tools, which ends up being something else of another topic to discuss. But definitely we'll have those resourcing webinars, and then you can have that training with your account manager if needed. All right, so those were the ideas there. Now, what I wanted to let you also know, because it's in our guide, it's not a secret, and someone mentioned it already, is that, and if you have the access, and you have to be very careful, and that's one of the things that we kind of make sure you understand before you change things. And the back end of the system under system setup, there's an area under transaction preferences that the guide mentions where all this works. And it's under projects, and it's under the schedule options. These three first check boxes under schedule options is what makes those dates move. And in the guide, you'll read it and it says, if you don't start a project or the first task of a project, guess what? It's going to move your dates. If you don't finish a task, it's going to move the date. If it's today and it should have been done today, tomorrow, it'll move it to tomorrow. We want those dates to move so that someone can go into and who are tracking your projects and your schedules to say, oh, why did it move? Oh, why didn't it get completed? Because that's what the system was waiting for and it didn't. And now the system is trying to tell me, hey, you're going to be late. I'm moving this task for you because I'm just following the instructions, and then nobody entered an input for me to register to continue to assign to the next task. So those are going to be those selections. Now my clients will look at this and will say, well, can I turn some on or off? And we don't recommend them. It's either these 3 on or these 3 off. You can definitely ask for help from your account manager to think about that. And then we would like you to know that it's not like it's going to only affect new projects. It will go back and update the changes that you make here to the current projects. And so that's a big alarm, right? A big warning here to tell you to warn you about that, so you're not angry or people aren't angry at you later of why the things change, right? But that you're understanding the moving those is going to have a global effect on it. But that's why now that I showed you the reasons why we look at that those screens as a grid, to be a smart grid for your teams to use to understand where you're at, and to bring to your attention, along with those baseline dates, why things are changing, or what was the original plan, what are you going to do next, right? What's the human going to change to make it work once more? From the endpoint of the creatives, I showed you already that you have the ability to see this in both options, to see tasks that are in a completed status, that completed predecessor status or not. Once you have these other ones in here, you're going to see that if it's not, I have some random tasks here from other things that I've done in my sandbox. It will tell you, hey, the predecessor is not completed on this one. So again, we're trying to communicate that from the card view. Obviously, from the grid view, you saw the yes or no's on here. but your team is able to update, change the style or at least the tasks that you're assigned to. What makes this tick is the project status active. In the back end of the system, you can set up project statuses to be inactive or to be completed, right? So they're done, right? So no task or anything else hits them. So that's what makes those tasks visible. And then obviously then your team can go ahead and say, okay, show me everything that I have so I can freak out for the next 6 months, or just show me what I have coming up soon due to the display option features that they'll have access to. So they can set a certain date range. You can see those selections here. You can group and order and sort once you have those breakdowns here as well. And like I showed you, having that predecessor completed. Now, again, we won't eventually be able to get into this, but another session will talk about deliverables and maybe having certain users have that visibility to see tasks with just deliverables, because those deliverables are the digital assets they're working on. So they're the only ones that they're concerned about, maybe primarily. And then we also have the topic of to-dos, which we've done webinar sessions before, and we'll have more in the future. But that's the ability for you to continue to collapse your schedule, make it easier to manage, and then to have these checkbox items across your schedule to say, okay, show me to-dos. But that's one thing also that your team can use to filter, is to say, okay, maybe the task hasn't started yet. And so if I'm using to-dos, which is, again, a way to communicate instructions within a task, sort of to then check off, I know that these are the things that need to be completed first, or I should see first, so that that way I focus on those first. Again, not able to get into to-dos today, but definitely to help your team know, hey, come in here, take a look at what's available in the options for you to filter. What's on screen, and to group so that you know what's coming up next. And we like for this screen to be for them, not to have to feel like, again, to find menu items and then drill and then click, 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 multiple times to get to where they want. They can go ahead and see a lot of things in here. Hey, I can see my task name, my role, how much time I have left allocated, and due dates, and whether or not there's a predecessor completed. Obviously entering time from here, right? So allowing your creatives or those who are not managing projects to really be home base here for them to see that. So Rhonda is asking, is there a report to call to see projects open by month or by a time period by client? So we don't have a default report for that. So we can help you in getting to reports like that, and that's for anyone. Just got to reach out to your account manager so that they can work with you on getting you that report. Everybody wants something different. You may think, no, everybody likes the same thing, but they want to see it differently, or they want it to function differently. So we don't have every report that everyone asks out and about. But there's definitely ways that you can find data sets that look at, when was the project created, or when's the project, supposed to start, grouping them by, client or by month or whatever it is. So there's definitely a reporting sessions and webinars that, we've had, and I'm sure we'll have in the future again, but please reach out to your account manager to get to those. So good question. And we definitely will help you with that. I would say from a perspective of project managers, and that topic of at least tracking, use that project manager project screen that I showed you. Again, both the Creative Today page that had the grid and this grid, if you're a manager of the system, under the More button, you will have access to the system settings that allow you to edit columns, and then you can then complete or update how you want to represent the information. Now, obviously, this one won't get you what you were looking for with by month, but at least you can do it by person assigned or by account manager, which is probably what I'm set up here, or by client. You can do those groupings as well. And I think under display options, you'll have similar options here, so I can see by client instead. That'll obviously change just the article there. I have other things in my sandbox, so I wanted to keep it clean for you. So I'm filtering by status. There's a few other things here that you can track by, but that's going to allow you to at least get a better idea of what you're looking at, and obviously having a Gantt chart go along with it to to kind of see those timelines or those options. And that's a great tool because, as you were able to maybe notice, I can update certain fields. Hey, different account manager, maybe I want to update some projects based on what I know about their statuses, or maybe need to consider updating some due dates, the things that have started, and then just being able to do some other tracking and more fields that I'm even showing here. So just be aware that that's possible, and that, again, the goal here for this one is just to make sure that you understand that Workamajig isn't trying to force you to change your ways or to try to make your life more difficult, at least in that perspective. We're just letting you know that we thought about this in regards to what makes a project, right? And it's really the milestones, right? And the work that's being done, and understanding that, yeah, we may not be able to always create something that's perfect in a perfect world, but how close can we get to it, and be able to come back to it and do a post-mortem analysis or a during the project analysis of why are we behind, why maybe we're ahead of things. And that's where the other benefit of the constraint as soon as possible is, which is the default, is that you get to see things done as soon as they can, right? Something gets done early, well, obviously it's going to pull the project to move forward, move more earlier. And obviously it's still not moving your dates for those that are the constraints. But if anything that you can take away from today that I would say to save your time, save you a lot of struggle, is try not to play with the plan start date, plan complete date, the answer to those computations, because the system will react to whatever you're changing and not follow those instructions that you set up. Instead, change those computations, change those instructions first, and then use that baseline. Use that baseline for yourselves, for tracking as a project, and then your team, your creatives will be able to see that if you set up those columns in this table to see the original or baseline dates for those tasks here as well. So they know that there's, what was the original timeline and where we at, so they can, support you in getting your projects completed. But that's what I had. It's a very straightforward call. We wanted to make this one, like I said, specific to that mindset, to that. I want to show you that in our support guide that we have here, it's open for anyone to access. You'll be able to visit this webinar once it's live. We try to send links to those that are showing as participants here. But even if you're not or lose that email, you can come back to the webinars and see the webinars for the past 3 years and upcoming ones for the schedule. You can reach out to sign up for more of these. But when it comes to the things that we've talked about, like task constraints, what do they all mean? I think it's constraint, or maybe I misspelled it. Oh, maybe, but there we go. I don't know why it wasn't allowing me to search, but we have a table that defines all of the options that you have, the dates, how it works, just basically what I went through, and then those scenarios that I couldn't show you in detail, but we did discuss the month finish as an example, right? How it doesn't move, the duration of project is there, how those push schedule date checkboxes in the back end, how they work, what they do. So you have that access in the help guide. It's under task constraints. And then you also have the auto schedule option or selection here that talks about what I just talked about. But we wanted, again, your time to note that we're trying to do to get the most out of the system, from both from the tracking perspective and from a backup perspective of why your project is the way your project is. So thank you for your time. I'm looking to see if I had any other questions. I appreciate it. And please follow up by asking questions via email. And thank you, Rhonda. And thank you, everybody else who participated. Okay. All right. Have a great day.